Okay, this should finish up Native Son. It should. And then one more, I have some stuff I want to talk about my character in the new book. Maybe a little bit about the male character, but a lot about my female character. And then it'll be time for dinner. Um, Max. Uh, while Max is preparing Bigger Thomas's defense, he questions Bigger about his life. He asks him different questions. Like, for instance, he asked him, "Did you love Bessie?" That was his girlfriend that he murdered. And Bigger says, "No, I didn't love her. You had to have a girl, so I had Bessie, kind of thing." And I think in this questioning, this is one kind of good dialogue section when Max is asking him about what did you think about Mr. Dalton, that he gives millions of dollars to they said colored schools, and what do you think about him sending pool tables to the boys club? And that's when Bigger says, "Huh, we planned most of our jobs, in down in the boys club." And he's asking him all these questions, and when they're about his life, and about what he thinks about his mother, and and like philosophical questions no one has ever asked him before, and things that he's never had the chance to express before. Wherein in my book, my character more or less comes to the conclusion about these things um, through observing the black men around him and the other men around him, and the women around him and the people in the town. He comes to his own conclusions pretty much through that, and the way the sheriff treats him, asks him different and questions, and how he's treated as far as the town is concerned. But Bigger has never had anyone ask him these questions. He's never, I think the line is, no one's ever asked him these kind of questions before. No one's ever said these things to him um before, and he doesn't know how to, he doesn't have to know how to react to this. But he does say, well, tell Jan I'm really sorry that I tried to, about, Mary, and I'm sorry that, I drug, him into it. And then he tells, because I don't think he ever tells his story of actually what really happened, that he didn't really mean to, you know, um, oh wait, I think he does tell Bessie, because Bessie, when after he's killed Mary and he's gone to Bessie's, and he's getting ready to they're getting ready to try and escape, to hide in the abandoned buildings. One point she asked, just comes right out and asks him, because she'd been kind of intimating that, I think you did something to that girl. Um, and he says to bind her to him, to make sure he's not alone, because I think that is the line. He didn't want to be alone now, even though he knew he had to settle things with Bessie. Um, he didn't want to be alone at the time. He didn't want to run away alone. And plus two, he's got to get her out of her place so he can, do this, because he says he's still of the mind that he's going to try and run away. He's going to try to escape, maybe to New York or somewhere, that he can, and he knows he can't take her with him. And I think the exact line was, he can't leave her behind, and he can't take her with him. So he's pretty much, decided what, he's gonna do with her, because after killing that white woman, he can do anything. And I think he actually tells her that. And so finally he does it. He says, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. The girl is dead. I killed her. They found her." And so Bessie goes, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah, they found her bones." And he said, "Well, heck, I didn't know what to do, so I put her in the shoved her in the furnace." And of course Bessie gets hysterical. He chases after her with the knife, and he's got it up on her throat, and he says, "You gonna act stupid, are you gonna, come with me?" And that's pretty much, so yeah, he does tell the, and she says, "Well, what happened? You never told me what happened." And he goes, "Well, her mother came into the room and her hand was out like this, and she was blind, and she was trying to touch me and stuff like that." And then, of course, Bessie falls apart. But as far as an official capacity, he tells Max what happened. What happens? He said, "I didn't mean to. I had my hand over her mouth so she wouldn't talk. I had the pillow over her mouth so she wouldn't, say anything." And also too, in the courtroom scene where they have Mrs. Dalton on the stand, they asked her, "Well, could your daughter have been being possessed sexually while you were in the room? Did you know?" And of course, she's a blind woman. She was, "I don't know." And they said, "Well, how did you know she was drunk?" "I just thought she was drunk." And they said, "Well, how do you know?" And she said, "Well, I've smelled that smell before on her." Kind of, again, kind of blaming the victim kind of thing, even though, like I said before, I really don't think that was Richard Wright's intention, but it came off that way. So anyway, after Max is asking Bigger, it asked him about his friends, and he goes, "Oh, they just weren't, they were just my, running buddies. They weren't really what you would call friends, blah blah blah. We did our crimes and stuff together." So you really kind of get a more of a feeling that um I got is that Bigger is outside of the world watching stuff go on in the same way that my arch villain is set aside from the world, watching stuff go on, but because he's observing through, observing the town and observing the townsmen and observing, what's going on. So Max's closing statement, the prosecutor does his first, and Max sort of says along the lines of, "Look, this man's never been in love. He wasn't in love with Bessie once. He didn't mean to murder Mary Dalton. He didn't." The prosecutor paints it in like, okay, you know, they went to the colored section, so therefore he was invited to join in with them. He, when they were in food, he was given food. He was, given drinks, and finally he had planned all along, and Jan, and then towards the end they stopped trying to put Jan in it. They stopped trying to implicate him in it, because I think they said something like they didn't find his fingerprints in the house, and he had an alibi. Actually, he had an alibi all the time. He had gone to some of his a party with some of his friends, and of course, since they were Reds, they were communists, they were like, yeah, sure, of course his friends are gonna lie, and say that he was with them. But he does have an alibi, and of course he did nothing. um and so when it's Max's turn, Max kind of says along the lines of, this man has never had a chance. This just give this man a chance to live out the rest of his life where he can be equal. More or less saying, there's no guilt and innocence, at this point. What he is trying to what he is trying to express is that, to let Bigger live out the rest of his life in prison, where he will be equal, where he will have a chance to um, live out his days in a kind of, and it's kind of vague. And I think, which is probably what a defense attorney would do, but I kind of get the feeling Max knew he was, rowing against, Niagara Falls, trying to go backwards up Niagara Falls, and that these people are not going to allow this man to live. They can't possibly allow him to live. And he speaks of his mother, and he brings in his family, kind of like we say, abuse excuse sort of thing. And he does this. and of course to no avail. And there's a scene when Bigger is in the room waiting for the verdict, and he says that even though he didn't understand a lot of what Max had been saying, the words that he had used, he didn't understand them, but he had this deep feeling of appreciation that Max would do all this for him, that Max would do give the speech for him. Of course, he's found guilty, and the sentence is death. And I back in this day, this is 1940, and actually when the book came out, it was in the 40s. So I really have a lot of respect for Richard Wright writing that stuff in the 40s, man. I'm gonna get heat, and it's 2014, so I can imagine what he. But his biography did say that he became independent as far as money was concerned over Native Son. So somebody was reading it, and we're still reading it to this day. So I mean, 60 years later. So and we're still talking about it. So it is a masterpiece. It is. It's just little things that I didn't get. But so back in this day, wasn't no 20 years of appeals. Basically, they gave you a date and boom, that's when it happened. It wasn't none of this stuff. But he he still has this appreciation, and he tells so in the end, when Max comes to visit him, like for the last time, you know he pretty much says his families come to see him. He sent them away. He doesn't want he doesn't want to see them. He doesn't want to see any of his friends. He doesn't want to, he's just trying to prepare. And he says, well, what he's going to do is he's going to just not think about it as they handle him, because it's the electric chair back in this day. And he's just gonna you know but at one point or another, he tells Max, he says, well, whatever I killed for must have been worth it, must have been some kind of ideal. He's all the way wrong. He's got the wrong attitude. However, he um that's what I mean by that. He finally comes of himself. He finally realizes, hey, I could have made different, because he's telling Max about when Mrs. Dalton, when he first gets the job and everything, asks him, does he want to go to night school like the last man who worked there, the last man who was their chauffeur, um, had gone to night school and got a government job and wasn't a chauffeur anymore. And she had questioned Bigger about, did he want to do that kind of stuff? And he, of course, he had no um, aspirations like that anyway. He just wanted to, do his thing. And going back to, the only reason he took the job was they were going to cut the mother's welfare off. So basically relief, they called it back then. So that's the reason why he took the job in the first place. But he Max, when he says this to Max is like, no, 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 no. And sort of Max goes, well, you know when you're gonna die. Basically, that's it. We're all gonna die. I'm old. I'll be right behind you. I'm whatever. And Max shakes his hand, and the last line is something like, the jail cell. Oh, and before Max leaves, Bigger had always called Jan, that's how you say it, but it's Jan, that's how it's spelled, Mister. And even when they met, Jan was like, look, I'm a man like you. You call me Jan, I'm gonna call you Bigger. Don't do that. And when Max gets ready to leave the last time, Bigger says, tell Jan I said hello or goodbye or something like that. And then the last line of the book is something like um, the jail cell, the clang. The last thing, is the clang. They don't do the execution, but they say the last is the clang when of the iron door when Max leaves. And we know what ends up happening without it being written. And as far as the parallels are concerned of my um criminal, my arch villain, is that he he gets taken back to Georgia. He leaves Missouri, he gets taken back to Georgia, and I didn't write him going back across. That stuff wasn't interesting. When he gets finally gets back and sees, the plantations basically where he was born, the place where he was born, the place where, he came from. Um my character, my arch villain learns that he could have made different decisions, not through a conversation so much from anybody, even though the sheriff is always like, look at, stand up, look at me, look in my face, when you talk to me. He's been allowed to work outside the jail cell. In the wintertime, he's shoveling snow and repairing shutters and doing this kind of thing. So this is how I got him, because he couldn't observe the town stuck in the jail, even though the window he can look out. But so he sees the black storekeeper, going to the boarding house, and he sees he had a friend that he met, and he has when he had gone on a trip to buy alcohol to one of the bigger towns. And this is when he comes to the conclusion, hey, if Mr. So and so could, learn how to could have who got educated, learned to read and write and arithmetic and that kind of thing. Um, Now he owns his own store and has money. He has a friend named Jimmy who he says is an apprentice in a store in another city when he goes to visit. He doesn't really go to visit. He goes there with his boss to buy alcohol, but this boy is working in the warehouse, and he takes him to his girlfriend's place, and he meets her parents, and her parents are well-to-do, for in one of the well-to-do colored people who live in the town. And the town is sophisticated, has its own black section, and then there's nice houses, and there, not so nice houses. But he says to himself, as he's observing what's going on around him, he realizes that ironically this would have been the town where he could have actually had a life, unmolested, or he could have kept going to Canada once he was free of the plantation. He had gotten clean away. So, but he was just so bent on this revenge, which, you know, but when my arch villain gets back to Georgia, he's the my main character is Georgia Lover. He's the owner of his own plantation by this time. He's that's when we find out what had happened to his wife, and that's when we find out that um he has a son, by his wife that died in childbirth. He has a little girl, and stuff like this, by his mistress, and all the renovations and all the, improvements that have been on the place. Um, my character is actually given a chance to live. Um, and I don't really know why, except that another show not tell. It shows how the Georgia Lover, I'll call him, is I don't know, sympathetic. I don't know what word to really use, because he's not, even though he thinks he should um be held responsible for what he did, but there's no need to murder him. What he does what he calls a living death, and he's going to chain him, and he's going to eat the same thing 3 times a day. He's not to speak to anyone, no one's to speak to him. And by this time, my character has decided that he doesn't want to just exist, basically, because the living death, it's called, it's just existing. You can't talk, all he does is work. He has no holidays, he has no, this kind of thing. And he decides that pretty much suicide by cop, basically, is what he does. He decides that he is going to make a run for it. He's going to attack one of the slave catchers, and he's going to make a run for it, which he knows is going to kill him. And as he's dying, he asks to be set free. to, because he wants to die a free man, and the Georgia lover man, the master of the plantation, does that. And the line is something like, the free man blank blank um, dies under the blaze of a Georgia sun, something like that. So that's how the two men, their parallels and how they reach their end. So I'm going to stop, do one more, and then that's it.